आप मानते हैं कि विदेशी बैंकों में हिंदुस्तान का काला धन है? आप मानते हैं कि देश के कुछ चोर लुटेरों ने विदेशी बैंकों में हमारा पैसा जमा किया है? आप मानते हैं कि वो रुपये वापस आने चाहिए?
Ladies and gentlemen, when Modi ji became the Prime Minister of India, he promised that corruption would be eliminated from India.
ये गरीबों को लूटा गया है, ये गरीबों को लौटाने के लिए हमने ये बीड़ा उठाया है। भ्रष्टाचार, काले धन के खिलाफ ये लड़ाई कभी रुकने वाली नहीं है। हम जड़ मूल से उसको उखाड़ करके रहने वाले हैं।
But unfortunately, even today, India is infested with corruption. Now, whether the news channels report these corruption scandals or not, even today, from traffic police to the ministers, at every level, bribes are taken. So, even after 10 years of Modi ji's governance, we are still one of the most corrupt nations in the world. Transparency International ranks India 96th out of 180 countries, and the World Justice Project ranks India 79th out of 142 countries. Now, even though a lot of people might dismiss international ratings as Western propaganda, we all can trust our eyes to realize how much corruption exists in India, especially during election season where money is distributed right, left and center.
Corruption is something that has always been source of major concern for all Indians.
Nothing seems to have changed from 2012. In India, in fact, 40% of the people polled actually said that bribery and corruption is very prevalent.
In all the departments of the public education sector, everybody is taking the bribe, no doubt in that.
So all of us have been trying to answer the same question for 70 years now. How the hell do you eliminate corruption from India? And surprisingly, I found the answer in Singapore. You know, Singapore back then was one of the most corrupt nations in the world. In fact, they had a rate card on how much bribe is needed to be paid to escape an illegal activity. So you could just pay $20 and run an illegal gambling den, just like the Hafta system in India. On top of that, Singapore saw massive communal riots, 70% of population lived in overcrowded slums, and the Singapore river smelled of rotting garbage just like the nalas in Mumbai today. And most of its population lived in abject poverty.
Singapore is just a slum-ridden, overcrowded port. 75% of families live in shacks or squatter huts without toilets or running water.
For Singapore, forging an identity and finding stability, security, and success was not going to come easy.
A country that looks less like a nation and more like a failed state waiting to collapse.
And then came a hero who is even today considered as one of the greatest leaders in modern history. His name was Kuan Yew.
Today, this is our modern city. 10 years from now, this will be a metropolis. Never fear.
When Lee Kuan Yew became the Prime Minister of Singapore, Singapore had no mass labor like China. They had no industries, no oil, no land, no coal, no sand, and they didn't even have enough fresh water to serve their population. And history says that whenever there is shortage of resources and poverty, people will always find the shortest way to make money, and that instrument is usually corruption. But even then, Lee Kuan Yew did something so miraculous that today, Singapore's per capita income has shot up from $400 to $90,000. The Singapore River has now turned into a tourist hotspot, and only one major riot has happened in Singapore in the last 50 years. So the question is, how on earth did Lee Kuan Yew eliminate corruption in a poor nation like Singapore? What were the strategies that turned Singapore into a corruption-free nation? And most importantly, what are the lessons that Indian politicians must learn from the rise of Singapore? Also, we would like to thank Supreme Court lawyer Pankaj Yadav for vetting our case study. People creating this entire case study took days of research and days of non-stop razor-sharp focus. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a question hit me. In a world full of Instagram reels and YouTube shorts, how do you actually stay focused for hours of deep work? For most of us, the answer is simple. Coffee in the morning, maybe an energy drink later. But here's the problem. They give you energy, but they also give you jitters and sudden crashes. And the moment that crash hits you, your flow state is gone. Your focus is gone. So I started looking for something with better energy without the baggage. That's when I discovered Neuro Energy and Focus Gum and Mints. Neuro combines 40 mg of natural caffeine with 60 mg of L-theanine, and because of this, the caffeine gives you the boost, but the L-theanine neutralizes the negative effects of caffeine alone. So instead of anxiety or crashes, you get calm, sustained focus in what they call the alpha state of mind. This isn't some random startup. Neuro started in the US over a decade ago. It was featured on Shark Tank, and it is backed by people like Joe Rogan and Steve Aoki. And now it's available in India. It's vegetarian, sugar-free, low-calorie, and it includes vitamin B6 and B12. So if coffee gives you jitters or energy drinks crash you, try Neuro. The link is in the description. To understand Lee Kuan Yew's legendary strategy, all you need to know are 4 good stories. And let's compare the situation in India so that you also have a fair idea about how bad the situation is in India. Story number 1 comes from game theory. In game theory, there's a concept called signaling. It basically says, talk is cheap. Anybody can say, I am honest. But to be believed, you must make a signal that is costly to fake. In India, if you look at the lifestyle of politicians, their power is measured by how much traffic congestion they can cause. Our politicians travel with a long entourage, they live in lavish bungalows, and they travel in luxury cars even when their salaries are less than 1.5 lakh rupees. But in Singapore, in 1959, when the People's Action Party came to power, the Brits had left a lavish bungalow called Sri Temasek. It is a historic bungalow with a blend of European and Asian architecture. This bungalow was designated for the Prime Minister of Singapore. But Lee Kuan Yew refused to stay in it to symbolize the fact that he doesn't want unnecessary luxury that his own people can't have. And after that, even the other prime ministers followed the same practice, and Sri Temasek even today remains empty. That is a symbol of Singapore's sanctity. The second strategy applied is based on something called deterrence theory. It says that a law is only as good as the probability of being caught. So, if the probability is 5%, people will steal. And if it is 99%, people will not steal. In India, we have a puppet mechanism with CBI and ED. In fact, even after a decade under the current Modi government, when Arvind Kejriwal was arrested, Justice Bhuyan said that the CBI must dispel notion of being a caged parrot, and it must show that it is an uncaged parrot. Now let me explain how the government can control both CBI and ED with the systems and processes that are in place. In 2018, the Prevention of Corruption Act was amended to add Section 17A. This rule says that the CBI cannot start an inquiry or register a case against a public servant like an IAS officer or a minister without prior approval from the government. Now, this law was brought with good intentions so that an honest officer is not dragged into fake corruption cases by politically backed mafias and gangsters. But this law acts as a double-edged sword. For example, if state government wants to target an opposing MLA, they simply grant permission to the CBI and the CBI starts investigating the opposition. But for the friends of the government, if the CBI receives a complaint against a minister, the government simply sits on the file. They neither say yes nor do they say no. So without that signature, the CBI is legally paralyzed. So they cannot even file an FIR. And even if you look at ED, as investigated by the Indian Express, 121 prominent politicians had been under ED probe since 2014 as of September 2022. Of them, at least 115 or 95% of them were from the opposition. And they had been booked, raided, questioned or arrested by the ED. So in short, in India, the government says, I decide who you can investigate. But you know what Lee did in Singapore? Lee used a body called the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau. This body directly reports to the PM, and if the PM refuses to give consent, they can go to the president himself. This body has God-level liberties. For example, if they have a reasonable suspicion, they can arrest anyone from a street cleaner all the way to a cabinet minister on the spot without needing a judge. And then they also have another law which says, If you have wealth that is disproportionate to your known income, the law presumes that you are corrupt unless you can explain it. But in India, if you earn $5,000 a month and you bought a $3 million apartment, the politicians simply drag the case for 20 years, and by the time the verdict comes out, they're already dead or it's too late. Whereas in Singapore, all of this is done usually in less than 12 months. So even though in India we have the laws to be able to punish the offenders, it usually takes so much time that by the time the case ends, it's already too late. But in Singapore, the conviction rate of CPIB is 99%. On top of that, in India, since 2014, the ED has registered over 6,400 cases. But out of 6,400 plus cases, only 56 have actually finished trial. And the other 6,300 cases, as in 99% of the cases, are still stuck in pending limbo. But in Singapore, CPIB has a 98 to 99% conviction rate. So if the CPIB charges 100 people, 99 go to jail, and that too within a year. So cases don't get dragged for 20 years. Now look at the math, guys. If you are criminally identified by the ED in India, the math says that you have a 99% probability of not going to jail this year. But in Singapore, if you're criminally identified, 99% you will go to jail, and that too this year. Now, do you realize this stat alone will scare the hell out of people before they engage in corruption? This is the second strategy that Lee Kuan Yew deployed. The third strategy that Lee Kuan Yew deployed was based on the belief that running a country is harder than running a company. So if you pay peanuts, you will get monkeys to run your country. But if you want the best brains who would otherwise be top lawyers or bankers in your country, you must pay them their market value. And they actually have a formula. The salary of these ministers is pegged to the median income of the top 1,000 earning Singaporean citizens with a 40% public service discount. Now, let me help you understand this better. So let's say the government wants to determine the salary of the Minister of Law. So firstly, the government looks at the tax returns of the top 1,000 highest earning Singaporean citizens. This group includes CEOs of banks, senior lawyers, surgeons, and multinational directors. Let's assume the median income of this elite group is $1.83 million per year. So this data says that if the new minister stayed in the private sector, they could very easily expect to earn around $1.83 million. Here, Singapore said, "We want you, but this is national service, buddy. So you cannot earn exactly what you earn in the private sector. So you must take a 40% cut." So the final paycheck is calculated as $1.83 million into 60% equal to $1.1 million. And this is actually true. An entry-level minister in Singapore earns $1.1 million or 7 crore rupees per year. In fact, the Prime Minister of Singapore is paid $2.2 million per year. And the fun fact is that the Singapore PM is the highest paid government leader in the world who actually earns 4 times more than the US President himself. Now you tell me, guys, if you get paid 7 crores a year or $1 million a year, why would you take a bribe? But in India, this math is a little messed up. The unofficial cost to win an election in India could range anywhere between 10 to 50 crores. But the official salary for 5 years is about 1 to 1.2 crores. So technically, a politician spends 50 crores to get a job that pays between 1 to 1.2 crores. So if you see, it is mathematically impossible for a politician to be honest in this structure because he must recover the investment through black practices. Now one could argue that our politicians stay in bungalows that cost 20 to 30 lakh rupees a month in rent. They get free personal assistants, they get free peons, they get free drivers, 34 free business class air tickets per year with 50,000 units of free electricity. So with all of this coming for free, why would they take a bribe? Well, that is because there is a difference between being lifestyle rich and capital poor. The argument that they get free bungalows, so they shouldn't need bribes, is a fundamental misunderstanding of the business model of Indian politics. The problem is, they cannot pay for an election campaign with free Air India tickets. They cannot pay for their party workers with free electricity units. Because politics, after all, runs on liquid cash. To win an election, politicians have to pay for rallies, social media teams, sometimes liquor, sometimes cash for votes, and also for booth management. But the problem is that the government gives them non-transferable vouchers. It's like paying a CEO with gift coupons, but asking him to pay his own 10 crore loan in cash. So, do you realize what the problem is? He has to steal the cash to pay back the loan. And the Singapore government understood that the same math will also apply in Singapore. Because even there, if politicians spend $10 million in election rally, they will take bribes to recover their investment. So in Singapore, a candidate is legally allowed to spend only $4 to $5 per voter. So for a typical constituency of 30,000 voters, the maximum they can spend is about $120,000 to $150,000. And if they spend even a single dollar beyond that, they could lose their seat, and there is no unofficial spending because the audit department counts every poster, every banner and every flyer. But in India, as we all know, even during model code of conduct, politicians keep distributing freebies out in the open. This is the difference between Singapore and India. And the result of this is very clearly evident in the growth of Singapore. Look at this. As the industry started flooding Singapore, their GDP per capita shot up by 170 times to go from $516 in 1965 to $88,000 in 2024. The slums of Singapore transformed into a world-class housing estate, and Singapore became one of the richest and perhaps the most prosperous nation on earth. And this story, ladies and gentlemen, teaches us 3 non-negotiable laws of governance. Number 1 is the price of integrity. You cannot buy loyalty with peanuts. If you pay a leader a clerk's salary, they will earn a CEO's wage through the back door. So, to stop corruption, you must pay for talent. Lesson number 2. Deterrence comes from certainty and not severity. A 1% chance of hanging scares no one. A 99% chance of a year in jail scares everyone. A law is only as strong as the probability of getting caught. And last and most importantly, it also taught us a very important lesson on the return on investment of politics. It taught us that we need to fix input to save the output. If an election ticket costs 50 crores, the winner must loot 500 crores just to break even. You cannot have an honest government born from an expensive election. As a result, we need to conduct an election that is fair and very, very accessible to the honest man. And the honest man does not have 50 crores to fight an election. These are the lessons that Singapore can teach India. And if there's anyone who thinks the model of Singapore cannot be applied to India because Singapore is too small and India is too big, I must tell you that we're not talking about applying the model of Singapore to India. We're talking about deriving the lessons from the Singapore model and applying it to India. In fact, Deng Xiaoping visited Singapore, went back to China and turned China into an economic miracle because he took the lessons from Singapore and applied it to the Chinese model. So if we can do that, I think we can become a developed nation. But if we just shut our eyes and ears and don't take these lessons, we will remain an unwise nation. And that is something that we do not desire.